The year is 1997. Tech companies are booming, the internet is revolutionizing the world, and political tensions in the South China Sea are tense. Directed by Roger Spottiswoode, and starring Pierce Brosnan as James Bond, in this action-packed race against time, Bond must recruit the help of a Chinese spy, Wei Lin, to help an evil billionaire with nefarious plans to, retain exclusive broadcast rights in China? That's right, we're talking about Tomorrow Never Dies.
Good evening, 003. The following is for your ears only and is classified above top secret by Her Majesty's Secret Service. Our contact with the We Can Make This Work, probably, podcast network intercepted an encrypted audio message regarding Podcasters Assemble. For this season, the podcast network is looking to recruit field operatives from around the world to reminisce about the Bond movies in a countdown to the latest film in the franchise, No Time to Die. Your primary objective is to infiltrate Podcasters Assemble by recording and uploading your submissions at probablywork.com, utilizing a two-way communications device with a built-in microphone, the latest from Q-Branch. For a full mission report, go to probablywork.com. We're all counting on you, 003.
Podcasters Assemble.
This is Troidal Power from the Power Playthroughs podcast.
Eric Slater here from Epic Fails of History and Too Young for This Trek.
Hello, my name is Ben Thompson. I am from badassoftheweek.com.
Yo, this is Corey Torgeson from the upcoming podcast, The World is My Burrito.
Hi, this is Jeff Naki, graphic designer and one-half of Significant Nautico.
Tomorrow Never Dies.
It is the 18th Bond film and the second starring Pierce Brosnan.
Tomorrow Never Dies was the first Bond movie I saw in theaters. It might not be the best movie in the franchise, but I have such warm memories of seeing this on the big screen for the first time back in '97. This movie is very late 90s, like early millennium, and it kind of made me feel nostalgic for that period. You know, when the internet was kind of new, it felt like we were on the verge of the future. Everything was changing, technology was just exponential, and it was a time when the future seemed to be full of possibilities. What's funny though, at the time, the corporate villain and his evil plot to, conquer the world with a monopoly over various branches of media, like that at the time seemed very out there. It came across as like extremely unrealistic, but today it reads a lot differently. It feels prophetic because we're in an age of disinformation and it's affecting real world politics. Of course, today the real world villains are using the internet, social media in these like coordinated misinformation campaigns. Whereas in the movie, it's newspapers.
I know that this isn't a perfect Bond movie, but Tomorrow Never Dies is probably my favorite movie in the franchise. You see, it's the one I have the most nostalgia for. I grew up watching Bond movies as something we watched on TV at Thanksgiving and Christmas time because they were marathons. I think it was originally on TNT and then it became Spike TV eventually. But that's how I consumed James Bond movies. I don't think we owned James Bond movies when I was a kid until Tomorrow Never Dies. My family moved into a new house around the time that this movie came out. And when they moved in, they had some guys come out and like install a home theater system, big projector TV with sound system and all that jazz. And along with that, they installed a DVD player. This was the first time we ever had a DVD player. And they ended up bringing some DVDs along with them to test out the system. And then they left those DVDs for us. And one of those DVDs was Tomorrow Never Dies. So I would just watch this movie over and over and over and over and over again, because it was one of like 3 movies we had, and that would really take advantage of this home theater setup. So I love Tomorrow Never Dies because it's the movie that I watched over and over as a kid. It was the movie that made me want to own all the Bond movies so that I could watch all of them over and over again.
The movie opens with a back to basics classic gun barrel sequence. You know, the classic John Barry music. We get this really cool, really crisp looking, shiny, like, gun barrel. I like it. It's good. I'm on board so far.
This movie starts off with one of the best intros to date, possibly in the franchise. Yes, even better than Connery's seagull hat. M was already given a genuinely strong role in GoldenEye. Now, the military powers are given a role with real mistakes, real drama, real interaction with MI6, and stakes with a genuinely horrific outcome. This is the first Bond movie that has made me feel dread. We also get to see Bond as an efficient tool of MI6, not just the main character. He uses gadgets with no previous explanation from Q Branch, and operates a fighter jet, which is probably the greatest example of his skills to date.
Cold open in this movie is one of my favorites in the franchise. I'm going to have to stop saying that for every single point about this, but it's one of my favorites because it's Bond on a mission with like all of MI6 and even an admiral from the military observing the mission. I like this because it feels like Bond doing some this is Bond on assignment. This is what his day-to-day is probably like when he's not saving the world, is going out on assignment where he's sneaking around. He's got somebody observing back at base that he's in contact with. And in this case, he's investigating this terrorist black market where a whole bunch of weapons are being sold. And there's enough terrorists here that the admiral just decides, hey, we're just going to do a military strike on that location. And they tell Bond to evacuate, but he's like, you guys, there's something here. Now, we don't hear him saying that. We don't see or hear Bond for almost 5 minutes in this movie. We just hear the person who is his handler. And basically, Bond reveals that there's actually, there's a little bit of a nuclear bomb here. And there's a Russian bomb, which is great because then the Russians and the American, or the British, not the Americans. The Russian and the British militaries are coordinating on this effort. So there's going to be a little jab at the Russian. Like, come on, can't you guys keep track of anything?
And we begin in Siberia, I think. It's this Russian weapons bazaar. It's like, I think it's described as like a terrorist flea market. And it cuts back and forth between Bond on the ground during a mission and MI6 coordinating everything behind the scenes. I love this whole exposition scene.
I'll admit, I shouted out loud when the cold open began. I forgot that it was in this movie. Bond is spying on like a ridiculous terrorist arms bazaar somewhere on the Russian border. A veritable who's who's of arm dealers here, which, let's be honest, that would be crazy. It's like the streets in Babylon AD. Yes, I just referenced the Vin Diesel movie, but still, how does money exchange hands here? Do you also fly in suitcases of money to buy the jets and bombs? I mean, what does the guy do with the money now that he's sold his jet? Does he just walk home?
I kind of wish that there were more scenes like this in Bond movies, where you kind of get like the behind the scenes politics of what's going on. It feels a little bit more realistic too, because I imagine in a lot of missions, Bond wouldn't be completely on his own. He would have, you know, the support of the entire intelligence agency. And also, the stakes for this cold open are extremely high. You're talking like a nuclear bomb's about to go off. This is bad stuff.
4 minutes to detonation when, their man on the ground, who we already know is James Bond, notices, yes, there are some nuclear warheads strapped to one of the MiGs there. And if this cruise missile hits it, it will be, as the Russian admiral calls it, another Chernobyl.
The British Navy is like, cool, a target, launch a missile, sending off a Tomahawk, from a guided missile boat a few hundred miles away. But Bond notices there's a freaking nuclear torpedo hanging from one of the jets. So, not the best thing, just blow up in place.
We open on a terrorist supermarket, as they call it, where they're basically selling all different types of stolen, like Soviet, Chinese, and even some American and German technology. The Royal Navy gets one look at this. They authorize a cruise missile attack.
But so Bond's like, we got to get these nukes out of here. And so Bond goes rogue, basically, and sneaks into the base because there's a cruise missile on the way. He's got to get these nukes out of here. He sneaks into this encampment by going up to a guy who's trying to smoke and lighting a cigarette for him. And then the guy looks up, and there's James Bond standing there, and he punches him in the face and says, "Oh, filthy habit." And that's our intro to James Bond. Just like in GoldenEye, the intro is Bond, like, appearing next to a goon and punching them in the face. It's great.
This whole cold open is fantastic. I love Bond's intro in this movie. He's lighting a cigar, or he's lighting a cigarette, or is that pot? I don't know. He's lighting a doobie for this Russian guy, and he just like punches him out. He just socks him in the face and then says, "Filthy habit." It's a good introduction, and I love that he's got that. It's like a really cheesy one-liner, but it's also kind of like a wink at the audience, and it's pretty funny that like Bond has come, from being like a guy who smokes like 3 packs a day to like just being completely anti-smoking. So Bond uses that lighter, which turns out to be a gadget. It's an explosive lighter, which I thought was cool. There's this fighter jet on the runway, and it's got these nuclear missiles attached to it, like these nuclear tipped warheads. The place is about to be leveled by an attack, so Bond just freaking steals the jet, and he manages to take off right before that massive explosion like just completely annihilates the base.
There's also a great line in this intro I love where one of the admirals, as Bond starts just like going buck wild on this terrorist bazaar and shooting everybody and causing explosions everywhere, also he can steal this plane. The admiral's like, "What the hell is he doing?" And M just goes, "His job." And I absolutely love that moment because I feel like it shows that there's been a lot of growth between M and Bond since GoldenEye, and she now trusts him. She's like, "All right, I get it. You're gonna go and you're gonna do your job. I understand now."
Cue a great action scene. With Bond blowing up stuff left and right, the terrorists think they're being double-crossed, shooting each other at Bond, trying to escape. It's great. Bond slide kicks the pilot from under the jet in a very cool move, knocks out the co-pilot and steals the jet, shooting off those awesome cannons and missiles, but another pilot's like, "Nah fam, you can't just escape." And then 2 jets take off right before the missile hits.
Bond single-handedly takes out a dozen terrorists, blows up a Scud missile, starts attacking everybody with an assault rifle and grenades. He steals a fighter plane, wastes the entire base with its guns and its missiles. He plays chicken with some terrorist fighter pilots, then flies through a massive fireball as the cruise missile levels the base. But he's not done. The co-pilot in the backseat wakes up, and now Bond has to dogfight a MiG while being choked to death from behind inside his own cockpit. He dodges a missile by driving with his knees while fighting a dude in hand-to-hand combat. He pulls up under the MiG, ejects the co-pilot into the back seat of the MiG, and blows both of them up together. Flies out, we go to the intro song.
Does anyone know just how much training Bond got? Like, did he spend all of his 20s and 30s preparing to be James Bond? Because he's an expert at everything. Not only is he a former naval commander, he's a secret agent. He knows at least a dozen languages. He's an expert marksman. He's a frickin' detective. He knows how to disarm a nuclear bomb. He can ski, he can skydive, he can scuba dive, he can parkour, he knows martial arts. And now, on top of all of that, he can also pilot a fighter jet. This cold open also has what I think is one of the best Bond one-liners when Bond ejects the guy behind him into the plane above him, killing them both. He just says, "Backseat driver."
Okay. Ejecting your passenger into the passenger seat of another jet is pretty dumb, but like, I really love how clean this scene is.
It's dumb, but it's good. Like, it lands. It's definitely funny. This whole sequence, really this whole movie, completely proves my theory about Bond having luck powers, because everything always seems to just kind of work out for him.
My favorite Bond moment is the scene in the beginning where he's a one-man wrecking machine, tearing through the bazaar and distracting everyone from the theft of the plane. And his quip when he escapes is, "Where does the Admiral want the missile?"
The intro is the song "The World Is Not Enough." It's performed by Sheryl Crow. And look, I grew up in the 90s. I like Sheryl Crow. I own at least one of her albums on compact disc. But she is probably the weakest vocalist we've ever had on a Bond theme song. This song is not up to the standards that we've come to appreciate from the Bond series.
So we get this pretty interesting digital, like, turn of the millennium title sequence. It's a pretty cool opening. I think the 3D Cyber Babe, that didn't really age all that well graphics wise, but they're doing some interesting things in this title sequence, and the song's not bad either. It's kind of catchy. There's like these diamonds that are orbiting a woman's face that then turns into the planet, and then another woman like swan dives off of the diamond, and she's like falling through all this like digital code and like splashes into a screen or something. It's really bizarre and kind of out there, but I like it. It feels like it's metaphorical for something. I don't know. Oh, and the fact that like everything's like see-through, like there's like this X-ray thing going on, which I thought was kind of cool. I feel like that should have maybe been part of the title sequence in the next movie for reasons, but yeah, no, it totally works here. I think it's good.
The intro thing is like some circuit board girls. It seems like it's a little bit CG, but that like mid-90s CG that sucks. So yeah, nothing about the little intro sequence really does anything for me.
The intro is very visually appealing. It clearly has this cyberpunk influence. The circuitry overlay on the female body bit reminds me of something out of Ghost in the Shell, and it is kind of surprising that this happened before The Matrix. As stated before, the jazzier intros really get me for Bond.
We open in the waters off Hong Kong. Chinese pilots are buzzing a British ship that's saying that they're in Chinese waters. The British are convinced that they're in international waters. And this is kind of like a pretty common thing, and tension is really high between these two countries. It's 1997, so we're 2 years away from the British turning Hong Kong over to China, which has had mixed results, I think. But there was a lot of tension between the two countries right around this time period.
So my favorite vehicle in the movie, I think, is actually the villain's stealth boat / lair. I think the design on the thing was really cool. They did a good job with that. The sets are great. I've always kind of loved that concept.
After the song, we get to see the baddies at work, and what they're doing is using this this remote controlled drill to cut into a British ship. They end up sinking the thing, and it's all being overseen by this guy named Stamper, this henchman. And then back somewhere in a base is Elliot Carver, who is a media mogul, who's asking Stamper to be sure to count how many survivors there are, and then tells them to take care of the survivors and be sure to use the right ammunition. The whole villain plot kind of gets revealed pretty quickly here, because basically Elliot Carver is in the business of causing atrocities so that he can write about them in his newspaper.
But a new challenger appears. A wild stealth sub surfaces, undetected by both the Brits and the Chinese. They launch a torpedo at the Royal Navy ship that ends up being a drill that bores through the side of the ship and just starts mulching its way like Pac-Man all the way through the insides of the ship.
How does this drill move in wide open spaces? They don't show wheels or arms or anything to allow it to maneuver.
We get a surprise Gerard Butler cameo here. He plays a super Scottish dude on the ship who gets half a line of dialogue and then drowns 2 seconds after we meet him. The stealth sub then fires a missile that shoots down a Chinese MiG. So now the stealth ship has taken out a British destroyer and a Chinese MiG, and we are on the verge of World War III.
So the villain of the movie is Elliot Carver. He's an evil CEO, and his entire thing is that he's manufacturing a war for exclusive broadcast rights in China for the next 100 years. I mean, that seems pretty short-sighted. Even if his plan were to work, the main thing his company does is run a newspaper. In just a few years, he's going to be bankrupt. So, yeah.
We cut to Elliot Carver. He is an evil newspaper guy. He's already mocking up the headline for the next day, and I like the way they foreshadow it a little bit, where he's typing up machine gun bodies found in the water, which we haven't seen yet, and then he orders that to be done and is okay, well, tell me how many guys are machine guns so that I can make sure the headline's correct. I like that. I think that's a really cool way of introing this character.
Elliot Carver is every conspiracy theory, and I love it. I think this might be one of my favorite Bond villains of all time. I like the fact that, like, his means of accomplishing world domination, he's not there to kill everyone. He's not there to just get money. His means of controlling things are by suggestion, manipulation and suggestion, and that is like such a cool, subtle tool to use.
So the bad guy here is Jonathan Pryce. He's Welsh, but he's playing American because, of course, American. It took us like 2 seconds to get into the... We have like a record for them getting into the dogging on Americans in the Bond movie thing. Like 2 seconds into the movie, the CIA got something stolen, and M is like, well, MI6 found the thing that the CIA lost because they're all incompetent. And so, of course, the villain will be American media mogul. Great. Here we go.
This movie has James Bond teaming up with his Chinese counterpart, Wei Lin, to take down megalomaniac Elliot Carver, who creates the news rather than just reporting on it. Going out against a powerful public person is hard enough, made even harder by Carver's henchmen, who are villains in their own right.
So Jonathan Pryce is great. He was probably best known for being the High Sparrow, but he was also the star of Brazil. He's Keira Knightley's dad in the Pirates thing, and we're kind of pre-gaming the 24-hour news cycle, which didn't really get going until after 9/11. But they're kind of there was an incident in the early days of Desert Storm where like CIA reporters were on the beach before the Marine Corps to like film the Marines landing on the beach, and everybody was like, what is the deal with this? And that sort of was the inspiration for this movie and this bad guy. And it's very like ahead of its time because you get into a lot of kind of a little bit more present day issues. You get into like some fake news things, some like propaganda, some who controls the past. He's always talking about being fair and balanced. And we also get a lot of pandering to the Chinese theater market, which is also very forward thinking because that's what everybody does in movies today. We cut to Bond on top of a Danish college student, which seems like it should be creepy, but it doesn't really come off that way. We get like some moneypenny flirting, and we get an S-class death stare from M. I love it. So the bodies are found, and the Royal Navy is being sent to the South China Sea to have a standoff with the Chinese military. And in 48 hours, they're going to be in the South China Sea getting ready to initiate World War III, and only James Bond can stop it. It's a great setup, and we're already hooked and in for the action. M and Bond suspect Carver is behind this, pretty much right off the bat, which is great because we as the audience already know Carver's in on it, so like, let's not mess around with it, let's not have them chase a bunch of false leads and stuff. Let's intro the villain early, and let's have Bond already kind of on the trail trying to pin this guy for it. So I think this is great.
So we get a little bit about Carver's disinformation campaign, and once again, I gotta say, this guy is too real of a villain. But at the same time, he's also like really hamming it up. I think it's great. I totally get how like his whole evil Steve Jobs thing might be a little over the top for some people. Like he's very mustache twirly.
Did Elliot Carver copy Steve Jobs, or did Steve Jobs copy Elliot Carver?
There's a really dumb line here where Elliot's talking to all of his staff and they're going through all the nefarious evil schemes they're up to, and one of the guys, he turns to him and he's like, are we ready to release our new software? And the guy goes, yes sir, as requested. It's full of bugs, so people will be forced to upgrade for years. It just feels like such an old person view on how technology works. Like, of course, yeah, that's what they're doing. It's all an evil scheme to get me to upgrade my iPhone.
Then it weirdly cuts to some documentary footage of Comcast Global HQ. I don't know why that was spliced in here.
I think Carver was a bad villain. Not bad as in person, but just not a good villain to be. Because basically, he's the world's most powerful media mogul, but he gets flustered at the drop of a hat. Sure, his wife lied to his face, but you should assume that she's been cheating on him, not like he's about to be found out about his, plan to start a war. I mean, I can't say that rich people in the media don't go on weird megalomaniac rants and controlling tears. Steve Jobs, Elon Musk. He was also useless as a villain, relying, on all his henchmen. I guess the best thing he does is type one-handed on a 50-foot projected newspaper screen.
But I kind of like it. I think it works, because I feel like otherwise this movie might come across as a little too serious. So I think that it's okay that they camp it up a little bit, you know?
We don't get much Moneypenny in this movie, but I really appreciated her scene in the car, and she had like a desk in the front seat of the car. That was kind of fun.
This whole car ride with Moneypenny and M is phenomenal. They are throwing Bond's sexploitations in his face.
Bond gets sent to Hamburg to attend a celebration for the launch of one of Carver's new satellites. I friggin' love M. She's just like drinking in the backseat of this speeding car that's like hauling ass around London, telling him that his mission is to bone Lois Lane, and I think it's great. I think she is a huge improvement to the series. I liked the old M, but I think she is like much more interesting of a character to watch.
The rest of the movie for me is almost forgettable. It's vaguely against Rupert Murdoch and increased control of the media in general, but with some exceptions. The plot is generic Bond enough. Some points in the movie I did enjoy were M still being in control, fighting directly against the military and the Minister of Defense.
I love her interactions with the British Admiral. He's like, I don't think you have the balls for this job. And she's like, perhaps. But the advantage is I don't have to think with them all the time. I think that is a great line.
Little note, before Bond talks to Q for the first time, he's in the airport and glances at least 3 newspapers, you can't really see the rest, with roughly the exact same headline.
Bond heads off to Germany to investigate Elliot Carver, but it's kind of on the down low. M is pretty sure that he's suspicious, but this guy's got so much power as a media mogul that she doesn't want the government to know that they're investigating him. So it's very hush-hush. At the airport, Bond gets his rental car, which is delivered to him by Q in a little rental car jacket. It's so cute. And this is the BMW 750. I love this car. It's kind of boxy. It's not actually that cool looking of a car, but it is remote control, and the remote control is the best. And Q like tries to use it, and it's all stutter, and then Bond just grabs it and sends the car flying, doing donuts and stuff, because it's James Bond. He's real good driving the car, even if it's remote control. That's great.
The Q scene in this movie is fantastic, and I love how Q's all like pissed about how like his cars are always getting blown up, and he like has Bond sign off on this waiver, just like checking off all these like insurance coverages, and then he shows him like this very 90s like BMW. But what's cool is it may not be the coolest looking car, but it's absolutely decked out with gadgets, which is pretty sweet. And Q shows him this Palm Pilot to control it with, like it's a remote control car.
We get Bond's car, which is like a very 90s looking BMW 7 Series. It probably looked cool at the time, but it looks real dated now. It looks like the kind of thing you could buy for like, $800 at a used car dealership. The advantage of it is that it has it's a remote control car, but like a cool one where you can control it from your cell phone, which is also kind of forward thinking. Bond does the Batman like stop the car 2 inches before it snaps your kneecaps in half kind of thing, which always just seemed like unnecessarily dangerous to me.
The remote control car and the flip phone scene is so cool. It is so 90s. The scene genuinely does not need to exist, but it is very rewarding.
The whole sequence at Carver's party in, I want to say it's Berlin, is pretty great. That party looks like a lot of fun. One thing that I kind of noticed during this movie is that the Bond movies have been really inconsistent about when they tell us where a certain scene is taking place. Sometimes they'll have a title card explicitly saying where they are, like MI6 headquarters. But then like they'll just do like a cut to like a skyline, and then they just kind of assume you know where it is. And that kind of bothers me. I kind of wish they just said where this is supposed to be, you know? I don't know why that bothers me, but it kind of does. So this movie has two of, I think, some of the best Bond women in the modern Bond movies. You have Carver's wife, Paris, played by Terry Hatcher, aka Lois Lane, who has a history with Bond. She's pretty well written. I like that her character seems to have a lot of depth. There's this history between her and Bond, and it's not like she's head over heels for him, but she has feelings for him. And kind of in a tough situation. I mean, she's married to the big bad. She's married to the villain, and she doesn't feel like she has a way out. It's kind of tragic. It's sad. Terry Hatcher does a great job in this role. I kind of wish we got to see more of her. And it feels like she should have been a character that we'd seen previously. Like, I was thinking, is this the woman from For Your Eyes Only? I feel like that would have maybe added a little bit more weight if it was someone from previous mission that we'd seen. But yeah, Terry Hatcher's gorgeous. She looks great in this movie. Her outfits are awesome. I always had a crush on Lois Lane. Yeah. Anywho.
Now, can I say that I loved Paris Carver? First, we have Terry Hatcher in peak Terry Hatcher form. She was hot in this movie. And she was only basically back in Bond's life for like 12 hours before she's murdered. And she stole the scene wherever she was. Sure, her husband was a jealous freak, but the best part of her, the first time she sees Bond, is to slap the shit out of him. And then she realizes later on that Bond being around is basically a death sentence for her, because she's one of the few women not in the spy industry that knows what he does. So she's like, screw it, I'll screw him, especially if I'm going to die in an hour anyway. I'm glad Bond felt something for her. But he forgot about it by the next day when he's flirting with Wei Lin.
Bond meets Carver, who at the time of us meeting him is bragging about having invented the mad cow disease crisis. Bond tries to talk to him, but he gets intercepted by Michelle Yeoh. She is the former Miss Malaysia. She'll become very famous in the United States in a couple years when Crouching Tiger comes out, but at the time of this movie being released, she was already a huge Hong Kong action hero. She'd done a bunch of movies, especially with like Jackie Chan and his like Super Cop series. I think she's awesome, and she actually does a lot of her own stunts in this movie. I think she's great. I'm a Michelle Yeoh fan.
I'm liking this slow introduction to Wei Lin. We meet the fake persona at the party, and then again briefly, like just as an introductory spy bit at the headquarters.
We also have Michelle Yeoh as Wei Lin. You may recognize her from Star Trek Discovery. She's also I think she's in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. She's a total badass. She's in this movie, she's a Chinese spy, and she kicks all kinds of ass in this movie. I really like her character. Like, she is an equal for Bond, just like Agent Triple X from The Spy Who Loved Me, but she doesn't have a dumb name. So that's a plus. And she also seems a lot more competent than a ton of the Bond chicks that we've had so far. I like it. I kind of wish she got to be in more Bond movies. They really should have brought her character back at some point.
So Bond gets blown off by Carver, who would rather talk to the attractive Asian woman, and then Bond goes off to hit on Terry Hatcher. Carver doesn't like it, tells Stamper to go take care of things.
This movie has a fantastic henchman. The dude's just called Stamper, and he's like this big like Austrian or German dude. He's blonde, super buff, and he's sadistic. This guy scared the crap out of me as a kid. He's like Jaws, but he talks. And the dude just has like murder in his eyes.
They get after Bond old school, where they just get a bunch of like old dudes to just hit him with a bat and kick his ass. It's like almost like refreshing to see like somebody deal with Bond in a way that isn't some elaborate death trap. It's just like, let's just get a bunch of like tough old guys to just like crack him in the back with a bat and just like kick him a bunch.
And the reason Bond is sent to investigate Elliot is because he used to bone down with Elliot's wife, because he used to bone down with everybody's wife. It's just a good bet that you can be like, hey, Bond, there's this guy. Did you used to bone down with his wife? You did? What a surprise. Why don't you go see if you can pump her for information? So he goes to this big event and tries to find out a little bit about what's going on from her. And before he can really make much progress at all, he gets abducted by Elliot's goons and gets beaten up and stuff. But importantly, not before he meets Michelle Yeoh, who is doing a fantastic job of infiltrating Elliot's organization. Elliot actually offers her a job. She's good at being a spy, unlike Bond, who is recognized immediately as being some sort of a problem that they have to deal with.
So Bond takes those guys out. He knocks a bunch of 70-year-old bald guys out with like a stand-up bass that randomly happens to be in the room. He hits a dude with a floor lamp. He breaks a guy's skull with a glass ashtray. And then he shuts off the broadcast, pisses off Carver, goes home, drinks half a bottle of vodka, and screws the silencer on his PPK, just waiting for Terry Hatcher to show up and have sex with him because he knows that's what's going to happen. He knows that these 4 lines of dialogue that he's had with her were enough to just completely hook her. The way Bond is acted by Brosnan is great. There's a lot of really subtle stuff happening, especially in the scene where he's talking to Terry Hatcher. He's Bond, and he's making his quips, and he's doing the cool stuff, and he's doing the action stuff, but the way Brosnan portrays him, especially in this scene where he's like drinking and mad, and he just got beat up, and he's like pissed off, it's really dark and bitter and tortured, and it's just kind of, he's making these quips and he's smiling, but you can feel underneath that everything, that he's got this like darkness to his personality. And we'll see more of that as this movie goes on, but I like the subtle like acting touches that really draw that out. I think Brosnan does a great job with it.
Bond has sex with Carver's wife, naturally. Carver did send her there in order to try and get information. Then she had sex with him. She tells him that where Carver's got the secret lab, and then she pieces out. And you'd think that'd be the end of it, because she did exactly what Carver wanted her to do. But we'll find out more about that later.
Anyway, Bond humps Lois Lane, and like, look, I know Carver thinks he's the shit, but like, don't try to get a woman to trap James Bond, because he is going to beat you on this no matter what. Look, he's going to beat you in hand-to-hand combat, and I don't care if you've been married to this woman for a decade and you're a billionaire or whatever, like, she is going to pick him over you. You just will not beat Bond at this. And of course, she sings, she tells him about the secret printing lab or whatever on the top floor of his skyscraper, and she like totally turns on Carver after 2 seconds of conversation with James Bond.